Welcome back to Typically Unique. I'm Kim Aponte, and I'm here with my husband, Carlos.
Hello.
On this episode, we are going to talk about some of the funny moments that we had. Even though we were in a serious situation, we did have some moments that either were truly funny that we could laugh about, or looking back now, we can laugh at them. And we also want to share some of the resources, amazing resources that we had available to us.
Yeah, Rainbow Babies and Children is a world-class facility for their medical care.
Yes.
But I also believe they have an amazing social environment there. And we were too naive or just too worried about our son and his care, maybe not to take advantage of all the things that were available. So I think this is a good opportunity for us to maybe talk about some of those. And if you're just starting out on this journey, to know that some of these things are available to you. And some of these things we didn't learn about to a year and a half later. So
it took us a while to realize some of these things. So some of the first resources that would be helpful right off the bat are, the logistics you're trying to figure out. Different places will have different requirements for parking and things like that. So we found out that you could get like so many passes for that, that could give you free parking. At the facility we were at, we had to pay for it. So you did have to get parking passes. A lot of people are traveling hours to these hospitals because they're usually in the bigger cities. So they'll provide gas cards for certain situations and we individuals.
We were 50 miles away, at least, So, for us to travel back and forth was, it was, we would go through half a tank of gas, a day.
Yeah.
So, and we were making
a
many trips, and, people were coming and helping us on occasion. So those, you didn't realize it at the beginning, but those gas cards really came in handy. That was very helpful.
Yep. And even if you're a loved one or a friend of someone who's going through this, just to know these things too. These are things other people could provide. And eating is another big logistical thing you have to try to figure out. So, you're in the hospital and either getting takeout or eating in the cafeteria, and the hospital would provide some meal vouchers. So you could go down to the cafeteria. There were also quite a few groups, like they were like Friends of the Hospital or different like circle types of groups that advocated or just did different work within the hospital community. And if they were having a meeting that month, they would invite parents who were long-term staying in the hospital to come down to a room where they were having a meeting or a presentation, and they'd have sandwiches and drinks and just things like that. And, it was open and you could go in and grab something, but it took a long time to figure out those things were there.
And about the food voucher, I didn't even know about, I'm a big guy, I can eat. But Aiden's menu was off the menu of the floor, right? So whatever the hospital was providing,
the cafeteria, that they would bring to the room.
Yeah, right? They would bring it to the room. So, he had room service and he had all that. Me, there are times I didn't want to leave the room. There were a lot of things going on. So I would miss a breakfast. I would miss a lunch. I would miss a dinner. And then when I did go down to have something to eat, I would typically pay for it out of my own pocket because, I'm just going at, all these random times whenever the cafeteria or the restaurants in that area were open. I didn't even know that we could have parental vouchers until, much later on. So, these are things that you can ask about immediately. Don't feel too proud to say, hey, what can I do for food? And, what programs do you have? Do you have any assistance in this area?
Exactly.
Do I need to bring a cooler, with lunch meat in it? How do we handle these situations? Don't be afraid to ask those questions.
And they do have a person that's kind of like in charge of those things. Like they have a social worker, but they're booked and busy, so it takes them a while to get to everybody. So you can ask for that person, and they have a ton of other resources too.
And one more thing about that social person, they come in very early on. It was probably day 1 or 2 because they want to give you as much information. You know how much of that information we retained?
0.
Yeah, I was going to say 5%. So 0 is probably closer to 0. Yeah. But we probably retained, and maybe all of that was laid out in either the information they gave us or the conversation that we had. We heard none of it, or we forgot all of it because that.
And I said they offer other things. Some of those things are, it's forms to fill out and based on income and things like that, but they will connect you to other larger programs that are out there to help, maybe with medical expenses or, things like that. So just ask. Things we found out along the way that took time was like that there was a Ronald McDonald house down the road where you can get a room for free when they're available. You have to make sure and apply for it. But that after we found out about it, months and months into it, became a respite for us just to get away a little bit. And that's another place where, that's a room for you. It's like a big house. They have a living room area, and I hang out. And even some patients would be there if they were kind of like an outpatient at the hospital and didn't have to stay,
out of towner.
Yeah, in the hospital. And they would have volunteers come in on certain nights of the week and provide dinners and things like that. So another thing that could have been nice to know about earlier on.
Let me talk about Ronald McDonald House for a little bit. Because,
we have to describe that too.
So I had a high school friend that serendipitously, I was walking through the halls. I saw this high school friend that I had graduated with. I was like, "Hi, how you doing? What are you doing?" And she had mentioned that I'm at the Ronald McDonald House. And why are you here? And I explained what was going on. And she was like, "Why aren't you at the Ronald McDonald House?" And I'm like, I know nothing about it.
Yeah, I think that's how we found out about it, actually. Yeah.
So I connected with her. She put me in touch with the, admission people at the Ronald McDonald House, because there is a lot of forms and all that stuff that you have to fill out. And she kind of whispered in my ear, she says, now they're going to ask for a donation. They're going to say, how much can you pay? You can say, Carlos, I would like to pay nothing. And that's okay. But most people feel like, well, hey, I can spare $20 a week. I can spare $50 a week. We were at the point we couldn't spare $2 a week. I mean, we were tapped, in every way, shape, or form. So when we sat down and they asked us, they said, and how much, do you think you'd be able to, to pay for the room? We are subsidized, da, 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 da. And I said, we'd really like to pay $0. And they said, okay. I mean, it was that simple, but you almost have to get over your...
Yeah, people wouldn't know that.
Yes.
So just another tip.
Yes.
And then later on, you can make donations at any time. They collected pop tab things.
The tabs
off the cans, and we collected them ourselves, bought cans on purpose just for that, had other people, and I would
collect
even
them.
Years after we were back home, I would just bring them up there constantly because they would use them to get games and just things they needed there for the kids mostly.
Yeah. And, other cool things about the Ronald McDonald House was, occasionally they would have tickets available either to a show in Cleveland or sporting event. And we unfortunately didn't get a chance to take advantage of all that. But, just to have that available to us where maybe we could have did a date night one night or something just to get out and do something with some normalcy. But
right, we weren't in that mindset to be doing, those kinds of things because Aiden was in such a serious situation. But others could. So that's why we want to recommend that to people.
Yeah, guilt pretty much held us back from doing a lot of that.
Yeah.
And in retrospect, and I guess I want to say this from my perspective, maybe not from Kim's, but in retrospect, probably not a good move, because I think we could have continued to make connections. I think we made connections early on, and there's some things that happened later on that, this continued for a long time, and we started losing some of that connection. So
right.
I think in retrospect,
maybe
we should
push yourself to do that,
to do
take
those
advantage
things.
of it.
Right.
Yep. So other things that they had at Rainbow on the floor, we would always see these people walking around, different ages, young to old, with these red vests. And they would be there for a few hours on different days, and they were volunteers. Kind of like the candy stripers, if you're old enough to know that term, but just volunteering their time in the hospital. And they would just hang out with the teenage kids or sit with the babies if the parents wanted to run down to the cafeteria or things like that. So that was
play
wonderful.
Games with them.
Yeah, play a game with them. That was really nice. And of course, so we've talked about the game room, and I guess we take that for granted, but not all children's hospitals have something like that. They had a literal room set up, a huge widescreen TV, a couch, a foosball table, an adjoining room that had blocks and puzzles and coloring books and Barbie dolls and things for babies, just every age. And a lot of hospitals don't have that. I know there was another major children's hospital right down the road, and I knew some people that were there, and I don't think they had something like that. So that was just huge. It kept Aiden's mind off of what he was going through.
That game room was a savior.
Just to get out of that room. You know, you can't stay in it's really hard to just stay in a hospital room the whole time. So,
right.
And then
what about the comfort animals? I mean, that was good and bad, right? I think some people were like, hey, there's this dog, a nice cute lab, all clean, and kids would run up to it and pet it, and Aiden was like, get that dog out of my room.
Well, I was leery. I just wasn't sure. I was a big, are there germs? Is there, I was on that kick. So
and so was Aiden. He didn't like it.
Yeah, I think that's a nice thing, though.
Yeah, a lot of people did, but it didn't work in our room.
It was fun just to see the dogs, walking around on the floor too, though. And then the biggest resource that they had for the kids was a child life specialist. So they had this young woman who would greet all the patients. She'd come in, just talk to them. I remember her popping in and just introducing herself to Aiden, and Aiden was not on board and not a fan right away. He was just kind of like, nah, he had his own thing. He likes to do things his way, but she persisted. And, I'm sure part of her job is just get to know the personality of all the kids and find out what their interests are. And she was wonderful at that. And not just the patients, but any of their siblings that were around. And she had access, and it seemed like pretty much just full access to find anything that could be needed. Yeah,
she, maybe to explain a little bit more about her. So she would go in rounds too. So she would be there for rounds, and she would hear the plan for the day, right? So she kind of learned Aiden, like if Aiden's platelets were low, he would be getting Benadryl, which then he would get an infusion of platelets. So he would be knocked out later in the day. So she would be like, hey, let me try to do something with Aiden in the morning if he was up to it. Sometimes, he just wanted to do his own thing, perfectly fine. But she was always involved in rounds. She understood, the severity of the disease, and she understood where in the care they were, so they could be a little bit more active, a little less active. She also would come in and do her own private check-in. What do you like? What are some things you like? Aiden and I were having just a silly conversation one day about a group I liked called Dishwalla. and this is in the early 90s, I think, or something. And Aiden was like, "What's a dishwalla?"
90s music.
Yeah. And he's like, "What's a dishwalla?" And I'm like, "How dare you? It's blasphemy." They had, a fantastic album. And he's like, so I was trying to find like a song or recall a song, or anything. And I really couldn't off the top of my head. Later that day, the child life specialist came up with a CD and a fake cover on the CD, so it looked like the real thing, and handed it to Aiden and said, "Hey, if you want to listen to your dad's music, try Dishwalla."
And he did.
And he liked it.
Yeah.
So,
but that's how amazing they were.
Right? They would just listen to things that were going on, and we didn't know enough to ask them. Like if I was sitting there, I could have turned to her and said, "Hey, could you burn me a CD for Dishwalla? I want Aiden to hear that. We got to pass the time away doing something." But I never knew to ask that.
But they would pick up on things.
Yes.
They listened. They, would do what they could.
Right.
Another thing that they had was kind of like a lending library service. They had books and movies, and you could rent a laptop. They'd let you check it out for a few weeks at a time. And that was amazing for Aiden to have, until he did eventually get gifted one of his own. The hospital had, and the child life specialist helped us find out about some of these things, but they had like their own little TV station because they knew a lot of the kids in the whole hospital, not just on the floor. Aiden was on the oncology floor, but there were other floors for the whole hospital that they would, if kids could come down to this one central location, they would put on this show for them once a week. It was always at the same time, so everybody knew. And then if kids couldn't, if they were too sick and couldn't leave their room, they broadcasted it on one of the TV stations. So
let me tell a little bit about that too, because thank you just reminded me. I totally forgot about that. But we had quiet time between 1 and 2. And I think this TV show was on around that same time. So we were all stuck in the room anyway. We had to be quiet. We couldn't go to the game room. So they were trying to give us some entertainment during that time. Yeah. And they even would do a bingo. So they would pass out bingo. You remember this? Yeah, I just totally remembered right now. So they would pass out these bingo cards sometimes during the day. And then you could play bingo on this CCTV.
They lead you through it. Yeah.
Yep. And so I remember a few times like Aiden won and he was like, "All right, Dad, run down there and grab my gift, my prize." And I'm like, "Man, I just want to lay back here and chill during quiet time." He's got me running all over the hospital so he could, because he won in bingo.
And they would have the prizes, that the kids could see on the table. So even if they were stuck in their room, here are the prizes. So, he could tell him which one to go get.
And I had to hurry because he didn't want somebody else going down there. So I had to literally sprint out of the floor to get down there to get the gift that he wanted. I think a couple times I showed it to the camera too. I was like, "I got it."
And that just sparked another memory for me, just the whole flashback of running down there. At Halloween time, they would collect and have donations of Halloween costumes for the kids, and parents could go and pick things out. Same thing at Christmas time. They might, at holidays, the volunteers and donations of things that came in there was just amazing. And sometimes it would just be a collection of things. And, they would let the kids, I know what it was at Christmas time. They had items that the kids could go and pick out to give to their parents for Christmas and things like that. So, just amazing resources. The other thing about the child life specialist, she also connected with Carly and did a lot of things with her. And it was a lot of art projects. I do have a photo of Carly. One of the things they got into was clay, and she made this little clay snowman, and I posted it on my Facebook page. And every year that thing comes up, I will post it forever. It is the cutest. I'll share it on here someday. Cutest photo. Did a lot of things with duct tape and how to make duct tape purses, and anything that you could do with that. Some other clay activities. And then Carly spent so much time with her that she made her like an honorary child life specialist, and she made her own little badge. And every time she would go up to the hospital, she'd put it on. And
she brandished that badge too.
Like,
hey.
be like her little assistant. So that was so sweet.
Yeah,
so
that
sweet.
was great. No, I forgot about that too. That's awesome.
She also helped decorate the door for Halloween. They were having like a door decorating competition, and Aiden, he likes to, control things, create things, come up with things his way. And so he had full control of what we were going to do with this door. He wanted to have hands, lifelike hands coming out of the door, because we had this mask. And so he wanted the mask, and then so we brainstormed, and she literally made clay mold, made molds of Aiden's actual hands, and somehow
It was almost like a paper mache. Didn't he like make a mold and then something that, and then you ended up painting it?
They were heavy, so it might have been like dunk your hand in the clay, because it was really hard to get it to stick to the door, but we did it.
Right.
Yeah.
So, so I think everybody, the people that were there were fantastic. I think they really tried to help us. I don't really think that we utilized the services the greatest to our ability. And that's only because Aiden, really didn't want to socially interact with people. It was on his terms, the way he felt, if he could kind of control things, and we'll get into why he maybe acted like that a little bit later, but yeah.
We had to do a lot to bridge that gap,
yes,
to get him to be involved in some of these things. And, that was okay. That's where we were at, but it took a lot of strategy sometimes, or intently planning things that we thought might spark his interest and get him more involved.
So Aiden wanted to run, I remember Aiden wanted to run a tournament one time, right? So we had done he wanted to do a tournament with Mario Kart, because a lot of kids were playing that game. So he wanted to have a tournament for Mario Kart.
Yep.
He wanted to have a foosball tournament. He also wanted to have maybe a Call of Duty. I mean, just anything that we could do tournament wise. So he and I started kind of spitballing some ideas, about this. And, he did do a couple tournaments. I remember one that we were in a foosball tournament, right? And we should probably set that up first.
I have a journal post about this, okay. So I'll read it first, and then Carlos will tell the longer story. Yeah. So tonight, Aiden and I are going to try something new. Oh, I'll read this part too, because it's interesting. I am a reporter for the newspaper, and I will interview Aiden. Here are the questions I asked Aiden. So another fun thing that Carlos would do with him. So he asked him how he felt when he heard he had cancer. He just said surprised, shocked. What do you know about it? It's an illness that's in your blood and is bad. What's the first thing you're going to do when you get home? I would like to visit Lakeside Junior High. What's the worst part about being at the hospital? Being bald. And, we talked about that last episode. How does it feel to be bald-headed? Terrible, because it's weird and not what I'm used to. The girl in the next room said, "You look cute bald. Are you going to get her phone number?" And Aiden said, "No, and she must be blind." And then, what do you want to do for a career when you are 30 years old? I don't know. What is the funniest thing that has happened in the hospital? Pocahontas. So that's the story. So that is about all the questions I could ask Aiden tonight. I should explain the last answer. It may not be funny to you, but Aiden was cracking up. Aiden has been playing foosball in the game room and has gotten very good. So yesterday he challenged me to a foosball match. Aiden was trash talking while he was winning. So when I tied the score at 9, I yelled, "Take that, Pocahontas!" Everyone stopped and looked at me. Aiden just turned to me and said, "Poca, who?" I felt stupid, not for talking trash, but for not coming up with something better than Pocahontas. So the story behind that is that, okay, so I saw that post. Carlos had wrote that on Caring Bridge. So I said, okay, I just had to share the first Pocahontas story because when I read this, I was thinking, I know we have used Pocahontas before, but it took me a while to remember. So this summer, my parents took Carly and Aiden to a water park. And on the way back, Aiden kept poking Carly and saying, Pocahontas, 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 until she got super annoyed. So that is where Pocahontas came from. And I think Carlos, like, subconsciously, like, because, you know, Aiden was just being so annoying to Carly at that time.
Yeah.
So.
And Aiden's, I have a competitive streak. I think all of us maybe have a competitive streak, you know, so I have a competitive streak. Aiden has a competitive streak, and he's a good trash talker too. So he would talk trash when he's winning, you know, like I was illegally spinning the foosball handles, you know, and, you know, no, you can't win unless you cheat, you know, so I had to be very, you know, deliberate in how I played the foosball to his rules, whether they were the true foosball rules or not. But I actually started to make a comeback, and I don't know where it came from, but yes, I was like, take that, Pocahontas. You know?
But, you know, clearly Aiden said that was the funniest thing that had happened. Like truly funny thing. So.
Yeah,
So we have a couple other longer stories, funny stories that we also want to tell. We will share those on our next episode that we will put up right back to back with this. So we will see you on the next one. Bye.
Bye now.